Thank you, everyone, for joining us for the CloudNative.fm podcast. And today we are talking about Cloud Native Glossary with Catherine, Pagini, and Noah. Thank you very much for joining, both of you. So,
Hi
Catherine, first
there.
introduce yourself to the audience first.
Sure. First of all, thanks so much for having us, Simon. We're super excited to talk about the Cloud Native Glossary today. And I'm actually going to introduce my co-speaker today. So I'm joined by Noah Ispas. He is a Cloud Native architect at Data One. That is a German-based service provider. He is also an approver of the Cloud Native Glossary. So if you have been on our Slack, if you haven't, please join. You may have encountered him there. Please make sure to follow him on Twitter and to keep up to date with what he's on the glossary and whatever he is doing as well, everything else.
Well, thank you, Catherine, for the introduction. Now it's my turn to introduce Catherine Paganini. She is head of marketing and community at Buoyant, the company behind the service mesh Linkerd. And she is also co-chair of the Business Value Subcommittee of the CNCF and brought to life the glossary together with Jason Morgan and is still the driving force behind the glossary. I'd say, yeah, come and say hello on Twitter and Slack.
Thank you very much for introducing yourself to the audience and tell us about Cloud Native Glossary. The way I look at it is like some of the people, like we or the technologists, we keep throwing random words to the people like mesh, service discovery, or Kubernetes, or orchestrators, or containers. But these are the terminology that easier for the engineers to grasp, and some of the else people who are not in that part, but they are outside of the business domain, or the CTOs, or the co-chairs of the company, or some graphic designer, or some everybody else. These terminologies are really really different. So tell us what is I think the business subsystem. There are some SIGs already exist in the Kubernetes space, the special interest groups who has this kind of a notion to help in contribute to some specific domains. So in the Cloud Native Glossary, what is the interest group is available as of today, and what is the goal of this project if somebody is really new to this Cloud Native Glossary?
So yeah, I mean, like the goal of the glossary is to explain a very complex. I mean, like we all know that cloud native basically has almost become mainstream, right? Like everyone is like all these big companies are adopting it. It's touching more and more people. And more people need to understand what it is. It used to be a very niche thing, right? Like when Kubernetes was new, just like the super geeks were kind of working with it, needed to know. But now it's not the case, right? Like big companies, traditional companies are transitioning to microservices architecture, and those projects are very expensive. And because they are very expensive, it's not a decision that's made in IT. You have in the IT department, you have like a whole group of business people involved, and they are actually the decision makers, right? Like, are we going to pay for it or not? They also need to understand what these terms are to have these conversations with their technology counterparts. And to do that, they too have to understand what it is, right? And like if you look at the main content out there about cloud native, it's very technical, right? So it's very hard to understand for someone who doesn't have a technical background. Like if you have like the C-suite, right? Like they're very smart people, but like they don't have the background to really understand all these technical articles. So our goal is really to make sure that we explain these terms, these very complex terms, in simple words, so anyone can understand them. That makes it easier for people for engineers just getting started too, right? Like it's easier if it's explained simply, but also for people who are not necessarily technical, right? And like I was talking about C-suite, but there's like, look at all, like if we go to KubeCon, look at all these companies, cloud native companies, they have salespeople, they have marketing people, they have all these people who are not necessarily engineers. They too need to understand it. So I think that's what the goal of the glossary is. Noah, do you want to add anything to it?
No, I think that's pretty fair. So what I experience is often that the same thing you were talking about. I have to talk with people that have no technical background, more business background, and somehow have to advocate for cloud native, and that makes it really complicated if they don't speak the same language as you as an engineer.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Because we know that in every special domains, like either you are the architecture or either you are the doctor or engineer, there are specific language that you be familiar with it, and also there are some languages that the community is familiar with it. And cloud native is part of the global community, and we throw some random words to the people. We talk about service mesh a lot, we talk about service discovery, we talk about orchestration, we talk about policy engine, and we talk about so many things. And it's really difficult for the business people to understand what we are talking about. And also for the new beginners, they really need to understand what is this domain is, what we're talking about. So I think it's a great project. We have something available on the internet where people can go and explore about it. Let's say if we have a business committee, we can talk about service mesh, and we term the client service mesh, and somebody, what the thing you are talking about? They can go to the glossary.cncf.io and just learn about the service mesh is always there. This is their agenda. These are the service mesh exist already in the market, and these are the way you can learn about it. So I think the goal we talk about with, I think, Catherine and Jason a lot before. I think early 2021 or 2020. We don't have this information previously, and we're really struggling for the people who what this CNCF landscape is actually doing. Different slides, different logos already exist there, and also people who are joined me today, they work on this on the CNCF guide. And as of today, we have something written available for us to understand what the CNCF guide is, and also the glossary is also available for us. So, Catherine, if you want to share your screen and talk us about the agenda, the purpose, or all these kind, you can go ahead.
Okay. Sure. I think there is a delay. I'm only seeing so I think it worked, like we were testing it before and it would take a little bit. So maybe now. Well, while we wait that the slides move, maybe one thing that I just wanted to add is, like, when we are explaining these terms, one thing that we're really trying to avoid is using industry terms, right? And that is really hard, right? Because, like, if you see like this explanations, when you see, like, you were talking about service mesh, and when people explain service mesh, or when you see explanations of service meshes, they use all these other cloud native terms, and that makes it really hard, because then you have like one paragraph that is explaining one term that is full of other new terms, and you would have to look these up all at the same time. So that's one of the things that we're trying to do, and that is actually pretty hard, right? Like, it sounds easy, like, and the goal is that when you read it, it sounds like it's easily understandable, but getting to that point and explaining these complex terms is actually pretty hard. And I don't know why it still didn't move. So maybe we just go without it and just go through what we wanted to talk, and then see, like, if it moves or not.
So I try to share the slide, and you will talk about it. We go after that. Like, let me go ahead.
Oh, the slides
Share
are
screen.
gone. Are you seeing?
Yes, I remove it, and yes.
Okay. That's what happens when you do stuff live.
Yeah.
So do you able to see the screen now?
Yes.
Okay, so we can go to the next one, and then you'll see us again, and then our Twitter accounts. Like, if you want to follow us, please do. And move to the next one, please. And we kind of talked about this already. Like, so, like, I mean, a little bit, right? Like what the glossary, what is it first, right? Like we've talked about Cloud Native, we talked about CNCF. So basically the Cloud Native Glossary is a CNCF open source project, right? Like many others. But instead of code, you're actually contributing Cloud Native definitions. And in the glossary, as we mentioned, we really want to define these complex terms in simple words so anyone can understand them. And as mentioned as well, it's like that's pretty hard, right? And so the glossary is relatively new. It was launched at KubeCon NA in with 50 terms, and we're continuously adding more. I'm not sure how many we have now, but we definitely have a few more. So it is growing, which is really exciting. And our goal is really to become a trusted source, right? Like anyone in our industry can rely on either to learn new concepts, right, that they are not familiar with, or we want this to be a source as well where people reference to, right? When you are using an article, or as Noah said, like when he's talking to his clients, like it's like send them like a different, like you explain it to them, but maybe you want to send it again, like it's like here is another definition or something that you can use to better grasp that concept. And also, like if you need to explain this maybe to your family and friends, what the heck are you doing, right? Like, so I think a lot of people in our industry struggle to explain to their moms and friends, like why are you doing with Kubernetes, right? Maybe the glossary can help explain these terms to your friends as well.
And I think so software engineering in general is a pretty complex thing, and I think Cloud Native is even one step more complicated, right? Yeah.
Okay, next slide, please. And then I think the reason why we kind of we got into it, right? Like already, like we see more and more people getting involved with it, and what we're trying to do is demystify these concepts, right? It sounds very I think it sounds very complex, and we want to make them more broadly accessible, because as we said, like it was a niche thing. Now it's basically going mainstream, so it needs to be more broadly accessible. And it is for engineers just getting started, like not only for just getting started, but like some engineers may also benefit it even if they're already more familiar with it. But like if you're getting started, like a traditional engineer who is just getting into Cloud Native, that's a lot as well to learn. So like having something that's really friendly and written in a easy, accessible way makes it really much more digestible, and hopefully helps making that transition. And then, of course, the non-technical people, which we mentioned. And the goal is they need this accessible, easy to understand thing. So that's the first part of our mission, basically. And then if we go to the next slide.
Yeah, that would be the second part of the mission. Now that we know why we thought Cloud Native Glossary would be helpful, let's answer the question why we need to localize it. So all those concepts were first introduced very English-centric, and as we know, the topics are very complex. So also for English-speaking people, imagine if you don't speak English that well or understand it very well, then you even have a bigger problem. The goal was to make those concepts not only for English-speaking people more accessible, but also for other languages. Because, next slide, please. Because the localization is not only about translating it using Google Translate or something like that, because each country has its own cultural preferences and uses specific terms and so on. So that's why it's important to adapt the content by people who are native speaker. And that's why we started to localizing the whole content. Yep, next slide, please.
Yeah, and one thing that is important to keep in mind for anyone who wants to contribute is that the glossary terms, once merged, they will become the official CNCF definition, right? And this is like a trusted source, or that's what we aim at being, right? And to become this trusted source, quality is really key, right? So people trust the CNCF. If you find content out there by the CNCF, people generally trust it, right? And for a good reason. And the CNCF trusts the community, right? And so it's really important for us to uphold that trust, right? Like for maintainers, approvers, the whole community, we really kind of, it is a big responsibility, right? And so that's not something that we should be taking lightly. It's not something that you write up really quickly, of course. And then it just, yeah, like it just want to make clear that like writing these definitions, even if they're super short and written in very simple language, takes a lot of time and effort, especially because they're written in simple words, makes it even more difficult, right? So that takes a lot of time and effort. And as you hopefully can see with the terms that made it to the finish line, it is really worth the effort, right? Like, because it makes it a lot easier to to understand. Next slide, please. And I think that's time for our demo. Noah, do you want to show us a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I tried to share the screen, hopefully without delay. So I shared it already. Let's wait some seconds. Yeah, there we go. So this is the main page of the glossary, and we could go through some use cases, let's say. So one thing you will do is to search for a term. Let's say DevOps. What you just saw is that you are okay, it's too late. But yeah, it showed also other articles where DevOps is mentioned. But now we see what a definition looks like. It has 3 paragraphs: what it is, what problem it addresses, and how it helps. At least for a concept, we also have different categories of content. But what I want to show is that when you are on such a page and want to contribute somehow, then you would have 2 possibilities. If you, for example, see a typo or think something is not accurate enough or whatever, you could just report an issue, for example, that is related to that page. If you don't want to contribute directly, but if you think you would like to contribute directly, you could also go on edit the page and directly make some suggestions if it's just a typo or something, and create a branch and pull requests. But I think more about that later. So these would be 2 possibilities to contribute, but there are even more. If you go to the GitHub section of the glossary, this is what you would see. And one thing you could do is to add a new term if you didn't see it here and think it's valuable for the CNCF, for the Cloud Native glossary. You could just go on and hit new issue, and the first thing, so the main entry point would be to add a new term in English. And as you see, we have a lot of prerequisites or pre-checks that you would have to do. So here you would fill the term, but then you also would state why you think that the term is important, and also make sure that it doesn't already exist. And yeah, so this is a point that's very important. So most of us are doing this work in their free time. So people who contribute will need to be patient, because as Catherine said, the content should be of high quality, and this requires some back and forth and incorporating requests and so on. So people need to be patient. Yeah, and if you add such an issue, it would be labeled with triage awaiting, which basically is something that helps the approvers and maintainers to to sort out terms that are not let's say worth to be added in the glossary, or that are not relevant. And if we checked the relevance, then the label would change to triage accepted. Okay, and then people can basically start working on it, but they need to make sure that they read the how to contribute and style guide. I think Catherine will talk about it in a summary. Yeah, I think that will be the most important contributing things. So if you want to work on an existing request, then you could filter for triage accepted. That means that those requests are accepted, and as you see, for some of those there are already pull requests, but if something is not assigned, like virtual private cloud, which is a new term request and accepted, you could claim that one by attending the Slack channel and ask to assign you to the issue. Two last things, the contribution guide and the style guide. If you want to contribute, make sure to read that. The style guide is basically about what language you should use, etc., etc. And the contribution guide is basically what I just showed. You can work on, so it just shows the different ways. And what I forgot is to show you that you could also work on translation things. You see that those are labeled with the language. For example, here language Spanish, yes. But therefore you will have to join a specialized localization team on Slack, and those teams organize themselves. Yeah, I guess
one thing
that would be it.
Yeah, just like if you go back to the how to contribute. So one thing, like
Sure.
some people may not necessarily be super familiar with GitHub. So we actually, like, if there is a lot of screenshots for every single, like for an issue, so don't check it out. So it's really a step-by-step guide for even if you're not familiar with GitHub. So don't be afraid. I know looking at GitHub for the first time is very overwhelming because I've been there. You look at it and it's like, what is this? Like, what are all these pages? It's like, and it is actually really easy once you know how to navigate it because they're all structured the same. But if you are not aware with it, like as you see, like it's really a step-by-step guide. There's one screenshot for every click. So don't be afraid. Check that out because knowing GitHub is not a prerequisite. There are prerequisites, but knowing GitHub is not necessarily one. Yeah, I think that would be it for the demo, right?
Yep.
You can
Do
go
we go on with the slides? Yeah.
And Simon, I think you're on mute. No, that's fine. Just stay there and then do share screen on the demo. And then slideshow. Can you do slideshow? Perfect. Yeah, just like a quick summary, right? Like things that you can do is like pick an existing issue. Yeah, if you please do not work on terms you're not familiar with, right? Because it's like, if, as we said, like you are trying to explain something really complex and make it really easy. If you pick a term you're not familiar with, it's going to be really difficult, because you're basically trying to solve a problem that you're facing as you're explaining, like at researching these terms, right? So you should be, you should feel confident about it. You can also suggest a term you'd like to work on, right? Like as we've seen, maybe like one of the things that we said, like you don't have to necessarily work on a term, you can suggest a term, right? Like maybe there's like a term that yourself you have been struggling with understanding and you feel there is no good definition there, not at least not one that is like easily accessible, right? Like then you just submit an issue, and someone else can work on that, right? So that's like a way to contribute as well without really being having like maybe the knowledge to do it yourself. And of course you can submit a new term, and please make sure the term is assigned to you. And it, like, you have to have an issue that's assigned to you, because we've had people like just work on terms just like that. Imagine like two people do that and then you're doing double work. We don't want to do that, right? Because it is a lot of work. We want that whatever work you put in there, it's like it gets the credit and whatever needed. So make sure it's assigned to you. If you see like a typo or something, as Noah mentioned, you can do that. You can just like simply submit a PR or edit it yourself. The slightly different way to contribute is localizing the glossary, as Noah mentioned. That is a little different because you kind of are part of a team. I think the Spanish team did another approach where they created different issues and just said as well to people, like, you can contribute to different issues.
Oh, okay.
But it just depends. So it was good. Like, it was a call to action, say like, hey, here are terms, like, because there are like some Spanish channels on the CNCF Slack, and he said like, hey, we're in need of help. Anyone wants to do that? But like in general, I think the first step there is to join each localized team has its own channel on Slack. So go there, say hi, say you want to contribute, and that team will tell you how you can do that, right? Like that's something. They're all creating their little processes and everything, and that's a little different because it's like it has its own little channel. So we have teams in Korean, Portuguese, Italian, German, Spanish, Hindi, Arabic, Bengali. Oh, and Hindi just got live yesterday. So if you go to CNCF, like the glossary, you see a little drop down. It's English and Hindi. So far only 10 terms, but I know they have more in the making. So that's live since yesterday. So super excited. I know a few other languages are coming too. So yeah, very important mission, because as Noah mentioned, everything is very English centric, and that makes it very difficult for a lot of people to learn. It makes it inaccessible because it's like, so having this explained in simple terms and in different languages is very, very important. And if there is no language team, you can even start a new one, right? Like you have to request it. You need there is a process. We don't need to go into all the details. So you need a minimum of people, but join the Slack channel. Say you would like to work on language X, and then maybe there is someone in the channel as well we can team you up with, or we can maybe help or try to help recruit people. But we definitely want more languages. So the more the merrier. So come join our Slack. Next slide, please.
Yeah, when it comes down to who can help, there may be a little misconception when it comes down to contributing on docs in general. A lot of people say or think that contributing to documentation does not require has no requirements or no prerequisites. But as we learned, you will have at least good writing skills. Will need to have at least good writing skills, but also you need to have a technical background and a strong knowledge about cloud native concepts. Otherwise, how Catherine said, you will struggle a lot when you try to explain in simple words a very complex topic. And of course, you will need some research skills, because even if you know about a concept or a term, you may need to do some extra research in order to increase your own understanding of that. Yeah, and I think what we already said. So working with approvers and maintainers requires some back and forth, some conversations on GitHub, which might take its time, but I think the effort is worth it, because if it goes back and forth, we increase quality, and the result is better. Yes. Next slide. Or do you want to add something? Yeah.
Just one thing. So yes, you need writing skills or the ability to explain things. But if English is not your native language, don't be afraid. Like, we can help. I mean, like, we can help to get it there. Like, if the content, like, the most difficult thing I think is like getting explaining that thing in a good way, and then tweaking and making sure the English sounds really nice. That is easy for us to help with, right? Like, but getting it there, that's like the difficult part. So don't be afraid. Don't feel like, oh, I'm not like super confident with my English skills, I cannot contribute. If you have the technical knowledge, if you have the ability to kind of boil it down, make it really simple, we can definitely help and tweak with that, right? So, and as Noah already mentioned, it is a back and forth. We're going for quality. It's not going to be a PR does not end with submitting it, or a contribution doesn't end with the PR, right? Like, so, and sometimes, because we're so few people working and reviewing them, it does take time, especially after a live stream like this. We get like a little spike, and then everyone wants feedback right away, but we're still the same amount of people. So again, just for the be patient thing, please be patient. We do see them, we do appreciate them, but yeah, it does take time, because we actually do have jobs.
Yeah, and maybe also in addition, so reviewing such a pull request is also not that easy, because you have to understand what the person is saying. You have to combine it with your own understanding of the term, in order to come with some suggestions, some valid suggestions, and depending on how good the quality of the content was, you may need to come up with bigger suggestions, which takes more time than just editing English language issues.
Yeah. It sometimes takes me like an hour for just like working on one. So it's like mostly editing, but then like kind of adding some, like, sometimes it takes, like, I'm not super fast. Like, I mean, I'm sure other people are like much faster than I would be, but it's like, sometimes it takes me like, because I have like a dedicated hour before I start to work on these things. And sometimes it's one term, that's it. So yeah, please understand that it's work for us as well. So it's like, and we know that it's a lot of work for everyone who contributes as well. Great. So how do you get started? I hope we get some people interested in contributing. As Noah mentioned, there is the How to Contribute guide. Please read it. Even if you're familiar with GitHub and you can just, and you think that it's too detailed with all the screenshots, there is like really valid, important information on how things have to be submitted, and that's actually the guide, right? Like the style guide has a lot of information on how terms are expected to be submitted. If you don't read them, it's going to be more back and forth, right? Because we have to point you to all these things that you missed. So it's really important to read the How to Contribute guide, the style guide. First step, right after, if that all sounds interesting, join the Slack channel. We have on the CNCF Slack, we have the glossary channel, which is for general contributions, and we have the glossary localizations channel for those who want to localize the glossary. And then we have, for each language, we have a different channel as well. But the first step would be maybe go there, or if you find your language, you can join both. So yeah, join the Slack, say hi, say you want to contribute. That's the place where you can ask questions, get help, feedback, and so on. And we've also seen like great interaction between contributors, because that's exactly what we want. We're now creating like welcoming community where everyone helps everyone. I'm actually really impressed how fast it became a community. As mentioned before, we just launched at KubeCon NA, and we haven't even gone to the next KubeCon, so we're between KubeCon still. And we have already a good amount of people there. People are engaged and excited. And so it's a very, very nice community. And I'm super excited about that. So we hope to grow it even more. So that's how to get started. So we hope to see you there. I think now we would be open for questions if there are any. Maybe we said everything already.
Yeah, probably.
Or maybe Simon has questions too.
Yes. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So the way I see it, like one of the questions that came to people's mind, like in a lot of the software engineering terminologies, there are some terminologies that people create up. So you mentioned during the slide, like if you come up with some new terminology, you simply put the issue into the GitHub repository. We review it, or you either can assign to the different member of the team. They can prephrase or define these terminologies in a better way. That is number one way of contributing to the CNCF glossary. Other contributions you draw during the conversation, like if you want to translate CNCF glossary in your own language, you can do that. That feel a contribution. That is another part of the contribution. But I am interested, and I will try to find those people who are interested in translating the glossary into the Urdu language.
Oh,
So
yes, please.
absolutely. And tell us, because I think that is the most contributed area. All of us wanted to translate this glossary into own language. Can you draw some tips on tricks, like how do you contribute, how you translate this language, like these are terminology you come up, you translate service mesh into Urdu language, how it stays service mesh, but you define in the English Urdu language, uh, or people have come up and they translate service mesh into the Urdu language, because that is another contribution. So to tell us, to the people who are listening to us, what is the best way to translate this language into your own language?
Do you want to take that one, Noah?
That's a hard question, actually. I just started translating one term. And so the first thing is to, of course, understand the concept, right? And then to go through the headlines. So I think it's the first one is what is it, and the second one is the problem it addresses, and how it helps. So basically, it's not such different than if you would come up with the English definition. You will have to think about the term somehow from scratch. You have to understand it, and you have to know which words and terminology is common in your language to describe it. So I said it's not enough to throw it at Google Translate or any other translation service, but it can help to have at least an idea of so that the translation does not completely differ from the original English content. But you will have to think it completely through, I guess.
I have one thing, because I think what you were saying for Simon, like for example, service mesh, would you come up with a service mesh, new service? I think that really depends on, I don't think it's the idea of inventing new terms, like how, like we're gonna say like, or define how to say service mesh in Urdu. I think is like, what is the common, like some language, it just depends on the language, right? Like some languages take the English term, and that's like how the industry is talking about it. I would think in German it's service mesh, right? It's not like
So,
not,
some of the words we just use them.
but in other languages they may have a term that is that is like means service mesh in their language, right? I think we should use what the industry uses, because otherwise it's going to be difficult to search, right? Like if industry uses service mesh and a language comes up with a new term and then you look at the glossary, you're not going to find it, right? So it should be whatever, and that's why localization thing is important, right? It's like having people from that country, they know, okay, our industry explains it this way, right? Or also the way an example is kind of phrased in English is not really how Germans would kind of say it. So it's like that's the difference between localization and, because it takes like cultural things into consideration and adapts it for that culture. But I don't think it's about inventing new terms in that language. I think we should stick with whatever is already the industry standard. I think.
Yeah,
Yes,
sure.
Yes, absolutely. That's actually I'm trying to ask in the question, like how you want to translate the language, the terminology, that everybody can understand it. We are the unique set of and as parameter to defining the language. So that's the answer to my question as well. And also, I think the another question before I let you go, the cloud native space and the IT space is actually, we don't have the terminologies as of today. We don't have those terminologies 5 years ago. We don't talk about orchestration. We don't talk about service discovery often. I've been in this space for a very long time, and there are 2 3 years I talking about observability very often, observability a lot, the service discovery a lot. And just the question is like, when we go up in the time span of like 2 more years, or we're heading to the next decade, there are some terminology going up, and these are the so fast. When some terminology is going up, it's an indicator of so many other like when the Kubernetes came up, it's actually coined so many different terminologies. So for the contributor, for the people like you who are investing time, tell us what is the best way to cope up with these updates and upgrades to the glossary and the IT terminologies.
Yeah, good question as well. I'd say we need more people. That's one thing. More folks who help us. So I think about it this way. So if new terms come up, maybe it helps to somehow try to explain them using terms that are already people are already familiar with. So because most of the time new concepts or new things are not really super new, but they are old concepts in thought in a new way, right? Like containers have been there for years, but they weren't called containers. Yeah. So I think we need to use common terms to describe super new terms.
Yeah. And I also think we have to be careful, and that's one of a very active discussion now with us, like maintaining the project, right, Noah? It's like, where do we draw the line? Because it's like, what should be included? There's one thing like when the cloud native, but also like a lot of people start like coming up. We've had like terms suggested where we're like, I've never heard this before, but it exists. So sometimes it's like, is it really a term? Industry term accepted that is widely, so at the beginning it may just pop up, but sometimes you have companies create terms for marketing purposes, right? They sound very cloud native cloud native but they're just like trying to, and then we do not want to have these in the term, because it's like it's not really an industry term, they're just like using. So that is actually a real challenge, kind of see like, okay, when is a term adopted by the industry, and it is like something, and at the beginning probably none of them will, because it's like it will appear, and then at some point it will establish itself. So I think like when they're very new, they're probably not going to be part of the Cloud Native Glossary until they have kind of proven to be valuable and accepted. And so that's a little bit of a challenge that we have. And that's why we create
that's
triage.
tricky.
Yeah. And
exactly.
then another thing, go ahead.
I wanted to say that's why we created this triage concept. The Kubernetes community is using it a lot because issues were created and people already started working on it before we even decided if it should be part of the glossary or not. So this helps a lot now with a little triaging.
Yeah. And another issue is that we'll have to kind of announce that a little bit, is like, because we're learning too, right? As I mentioned, like we just started Cloud at KubeCon NA, and that's when people started contributing. So it's a huge learning curve for us as well, right? And at the beginning, we're like, oh yeah, issue, yeah, sure. And then at some point we were like, oh, hold on, like what should be part of it? So we have realized that some terms that people are actually working, and we let people work on, and like that should actually not be part of the glossary. So that is a little bit, so it's not the nicest thing to occur, unfortunately, but it's like for us a learning process as well. We did talk to the CNCF, and it will have to stick to what the cloud native definition is. And I think that's something that we should probably, in the issue template, Noah, I think at some point we should have like that they should check if it, because that's very new, right? Like, does it comply or does it fit into that definition by the CNCF? So those are kind of like a little bit the pain points of a new project, kind of learning about how to manage it and like, what should be part of it or not. So another thing is like we are learning too. So
of course.
Yes, absolutely. That's I'm also thinking about it, because a lot of the people who've written books on the cloud native in the cloud native space, and they're really struggling to find the definitions and these glossary terms, because when they are launching the book and when somebody translating their language into their own language, they have their own way of thinking about these similar terminologies. But previously, like 5 years before, we don't have those channels. Like today is really easy. Like I'm talking to you over the internet. We can talk to you on the Slack channel. We can talk to you on the Twitter. So I think the hurdle being the communication channel. As of today, we have so many good communication channels. That's the good news. We are moving in a very fast direction in the cloud native space, like in terms of the projects, in terms of the terminologies, in terms of the open sourcing. Every day, I don't see a week where we don't have announcement of open source project landed in the CNCF. So that's a very evolving area. But it's good we have a communication channels, we have a community, and that community, CNCF, we trust the community. They know these are the people who are the innovators of these terminologies. They are the people who are contributed to the open source project. So they make respect to those people. So that's the good news. That's a wonderful news. So today I learned about, if people who are watching us, I see some of the areas that they can contribute it. They can file an issue about the new terminology. They can localize their language into their own language, or even they ask people to go into the glossary and start contributing into it. By asking other, by helping other, by motivating other is also the part of the contribution in itself. So you're motivating other people to be part of the CNC glossary community. So that's another contribution into it. So before I let you go, the final question from my side is, what next, and what are the different talks, and what you should how people say hello to you in KubeCon Valencia?
As to what next, so I think like we want to make sure that we include more terms, more relevant terms, and that again is the issue. Like what are those, and what are what aren't those? So just grow it, right? Like make sure that it is comprehensive and focused on cloud native, right? And on the localization side, we just started, right? We just have 10 terms for Hindi. There's lots of work to do.
Absolutely.
We have a lot of language, like we had a lot of language teams. I mean, it feels like a lot, but there's so many more language. So it's like, it's not even like a fraction of all the languages available. So I think, I mean, personally, I would love, like, I'm super excited about seeing the glossary in different languages. So like I would love to encourage more people from different countries to set up new teams and translate that, because it is not only because I want to see it in all these languages, because it's so important, because it's so difficult to understand these complex terms in English if you're not a native speaker. So it is really important, an important mission, and I hope people see and value that. And just come and say hi in the Slack channel, and let's do this.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So thank you very much for spending time with me today on the podcast. I think everybody who's watching or listening to the podcast, it really help us understanding the terminology, because I think in the CNCF and the cloud native came into being, there are some difficulties in understanding the language, and there are difficulties in also telling the people the right way of telling the people to how to go about these terminology. And a way this, I think that I really love, because I'm missing this part for a very long time, and we have some communications being in the past. Would it be nice to have these things for the people to read about it or can portray? And on the language side, everybody who are watching to us, they want to contribute to their localizing the CNCF glossary. The Twitter handle is mentioned on the stream. You can join in and try to start communicating about this, and we will love to help you in this way. And I'm absolutely ready to convert this language into the Urdu language and try to find the people, right people into it. And hopefully during the KubeCon time or after the KubeCon, we have something in the glossary that people can click on the language. There's Urdu button is available for us to, they can translate in the language, because so many people are using the Urdu language. I hope this help for those users as well. So thank you, Catherine, extension Noah, for joining me on the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
And it's been a wonderful experience about learning this Cloud Native Glossary today. Thank you, everyone who showed up for the podcast. We hope to see you again in the future, alive again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.